Good afternoon and welcome to You and Your Business with me, Alec on 103.2 Dublin City FM. Each week, I invite an expert from the world of business to talk about their knowledge, insights, and tips to help you with your challenges. If there's a topic you would like covered or if you feel you can make a contribution, please email me at yourbusiness@dublincityfm.ie and perhaps we'll be having a chat here one day soon. My guest today is the Senior Marketing Manager, Global Operations in Ireland for Refurbed. He's a huge believer in sustainability and is passionate about working with a company that has the environment in mind. I'm delighted to welcome Padraig Power to the You and Your Business studio. Hiya, Padraig.
Hi, Alec. I'm well, thank you. How are you doing?
Yeah, fantastic. Great to have you here. I'm going to, as you know, take you back to your last year in school. Or were you the academic? Were you the person who wanted to get into the workforce? What was going through your mind, sort of when you're coming up to your leaving cert?
Yeah, great question. I was also always very much the academic. I'm the eldest child in a family, so I've always been a bit of a leader and wanting to, use my mind as much as I can and been headstrong. So I was always an academic and wanted to continue that path and go straight into university and broaden my learnings.
All right. So, was there any particular topic in mind that you had when you wanted to go to college?
So yes and no. I think I was very much what a lot of students are these days, or leaving cert students. I was very undecided, but I knew that I just wanted to continue and go and kind of probably rushed in a little bit. At the time, I was very interested in science, so for the leaving cert for the secondary school cycle, science always interested me, and it was always something I was good at, and I liked to learn more about. So with that in mind, I went to UCC and I studied neuroscience for it was a course for 4 years, which was really interesting. But obviously, is where I am right now wasn't the path for me.
Oh, let's just talk about neuroscience for our audience out there who know little about neuroscience. Tell me what is the sort of basis of it and what are you trying to achieve in your learnings there?
Sure, yeah. So it's a really good discipline. Essentially, what the studies that I did anyway was working about understanding neurodegenerative diseases. So
Oh,
Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, all of those that you could think of, and the general workings behind it, or the premise behind my course was to help to find better treatments or hopefully eventually cures for these. So there was a lot of research on neural pathways, how these diseases affect people, how they degrade over time or degenerate over time, and then with regards to that, where can we stop it? Can we restore the things that are gone, or can we just stop the progression? Or so seeing what you could do there, really cool discipline.
yeah, I could see us having a whole program on just that alone. But all right, this wasn't going to be the pathway for the future. I mean, you spent your 4 years in college getting your degree on that, but there was a sort of realization that maybe this wasn't the path you wanted to follow going forward.
Absolutely. So although it was super interesting, and when it's kind of said in that way, it again excites me, and I'm like, oh, that sounds so cool. But when actually in the lab and when working on it, it's very much, which makes sense. It's very much formula based, and this is what you do, and this is the step, and you can't miss one step. You can't even be out by a minute, and you just repeat the same thing. At least at the junior level or the starting level. And for me, while I love data and I love research and I love facts, I also love creativity and I love to be able to use my mind to innovate and do something new. So I found that aspect a bit stifling, and it was interesting, but a project that takes 10 years is a project that's probably 9 years too long for me. So it
Yeah,
wasn't
I know
worth
what you mean. And it's also the discipline you have to go through step by step by step and each time, and it's just repeated. And
it.
so, as you said, there's no room for creativity. So you're going to take some time out from that. Tell me what was going through your mind or where you were going to go and what were you going to look at?
Yeah, no, great question. So I finished and I was like, look, I know it's not for me. I don't want to work in it. I'm not exactly sure what I want to do yet. So I did what I probably should have done at the start, and I took a bit of time out. But this time, at least I had a degree behind me. But with that in mind, I still wasn't 100% sure. So I took 2 years. One of them, I moved to Paris for the year, and I worked there, which was really exciting. It was good to see a different way of life and to get to meet new people. And then outside of that, I came back to Ireland and I worked in Cork for a year, which is where I did my undergrad, just because I really, really like Cork. So I did that. And by the end of the 2 years, I realized, or I came to the conclusion of what I touched on earlier of, okay, I love the discipline aspect, I love the research aspect, I love all of that, and I really like my facts, but I want to be able to do something with it. And then business came to mind because you can do a lot of market research. You can look at your internal structures. You can look at your current customer base. There's so many things that you can look at, and then you actually get to make an informed decision, or you get to use your your innovativity, if that's the word, or creativity to
Yeah.
do something new.
No, I tell you, it's quite interesting what's happening here. I mean, if we look at the pathway you've taken, what you've discovered is, yes, discipline is very important, and I can adhere to it quite well. However, I do need a good chunk of creativity to give me some freedom to explore what I'm doing here. So obviously, this sort of marketing and research fitted that bill nicely for you.
Absolutely, yeah. It was the perfect match there because I'm also someone, while I do love creativity and that aspect, I'm not an artist. So, at the same time, I need my creativity to have boundaries because otherwise I'll be lost.
All right, so your discipline keeps you within your boundaries and your creativity gets you outside your discipline. I like that.
Exactly.
There's a bit of a juxtaposition on how that all works. So you found yourself in market research and working in a business. What was that like? I mean, you're now into the sort of corporate world, albeit whether it's small. What was that like, and how did you find that?
Yeah, so that was super interesting. So when I got to the decision that I wanted to do that, I went into UCC for a year, did a master's in the marketing and management, and from there then it was just a 1 year master's, a conversion one, which was very interesting. And again, love Cork. So I wanted to stay in Cork at the time and moved to Hayfield Manor, which is like that an SME, like you mentioned. And Hayfield Manor has three different hotels, and I was working in all three kind of in the sales and marketing department. And it was very interesting to move into the space to finally be working within marketing. And I did really enjoy it. I definitely learned a lot. There was certain things I did which were proper milestones for me for like first time. So for example, because it was a smaller business, you were able to get your hands on certain things, which was a big project. Was I introduced a CRM dining system.
All right.
So yeah, it was really nice. So before it was very manual and you couldn't really do a lot of the stuff online, or if you could, it was the staff internally outside customers couldn't book themselves. Whereas I brought in a system that had online reservations that also synced with the room booking system and very automated. So that was an intense project, but a really good project to get my hands on within my first year. And then also I did a touch on branding and choosing, different types of aspects for
Sure.
new branded options. So it was definitely fun because you do get your hands on things. But then also when it's a smaller business like that, there's less room for actual career growth
Yeah.
because you do have your formula, you have your people, they've been there for a long time, and
Yeah.
you're in
So
the puzzle,
you
but where
have
are you
your
going to go?
restrictions there as well. And if you're just joining us now, you're listening to You and Your Business with me, Alec Drew, on 103.2 Dublin City FM, where my guest today is Padraig Power of Refurbed. I was just talking, Padraig, a couple of questions jumped to mind. We were talking about Hayfield Manor, there's three hotels. Um, I've worked with hotel groups, and they're not known for having loose purse strings. So I'm sure you must have had to justify every piece of your spend, and particularly the CRM system. That must have been an interesting conversation with management to take them on that journey and to sort of prove that this is a non-brainer when it comes to repaying itself.
Absolutely. You're dead right with regards to the purse strings. There wasn't a lot of room for additional activities. But luckily, Hayfield itself is quite well known. It's the only five-star in Cork City, so it did speak for itself with regards to a lot of the marketing, or sometimes not even needed marketing. With regards to the CRM, you're also correct. And it was something that I learned fairly quickly. So it was the sales and marketing director who obviously got CRM system approved. But one of the main ways in which that was presented, I suppose, to the general manager, CEO, was that it was going to operationally be beneficial. So, as I mentioned, it actually lessened staff having to take phone calls to do the bookings because it was now online. Also, customers could manage them themselves. Also, with regards to the 5-star service, the system held on to any dietary requirements and any birthdays or anything. So if I, as a consumer, booked and said, "Hey, I want to book this date, blah blah blah," and then I would note in, "Oh, I'm a vegetarian, and I'm actually dining for my birthday," and
Sure.
just put that in there. Next time I book, all of that's already there. So it was, yes, it's great, as a CRM tool, but for management, it was like, okay, the customer gets to do it themselves, and also when they do arrive, even for their dinner, the staff member already can say to them when welcoming them, "Oh, hello, Mr. Power. Yes, welcome here. You're coming for your birthday, I believe, and you're a vegetarian. We've that menu set for you already." So it was really about also presenting how it enhanced the experience for the customer.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge win-win, but often, I mean, you're obviously, I won't say lucky, but you were obviously able to make the right case for what you were doing, because there's often huge resistance to technology in terms of changes, driven by management who don't fully understand the technology or don't see the potential benefit of the productivity savings in it.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's something I experienced for the next number of years after Hayfield as well.
Yeah. Oh, so that was successful. I mean, it's great because once you get the buy-in, it must have been interesting then to find the right sort of CRM system, or were you able to go out and find something that's been created specifically for the hotel sector that's already a proven piece of technology?
Yes, so the system we found was already available. It was primarily for restaurants as opposed to for hotels. But one of the key reasons as to why it was the one that we chose was because we were able to integrate it with our current room booking system. So
Ah,
it was really important then because it was an automatic 360 experience. And for Hayfield Manor, the dining is actually huge. Like, so it was for the three hotels, but for Hayfield, for example, the dining is huge. It's a huge part of the stay. Like people come, they usually come for 2 nights. They book breakfast for the 2 days. They book their time. They book dinner for at least one night. They usually book an afternoon tea. So there's like 4 touch points within their 2 day stay at a minimum. So it's quite an integral part.
it's interesting. I stayed in a hotel in Ireland, and I won't mention it. But when you went down to reception and say, or go to the restaurant itself and say, "Can I book a table?" No, I'm sorry. You have to use our in-house system. So you have to go online to do
Okay, yeah,
it.
but it wasn't like that in Hayfield. They'll still book
No,
it
I'm
for you
gathering that.
themselves.
But that's just people who don't understand the technology, that not everybody's technically savvy. All right, you're going to be there for a while, and then you're going to move on. What was next on your agenda?
Yeah, so next, so to frame, I suppose, my thought of mind at the time, when I was in Hayfield, it was really exciting, but like I mentioned, there was a ceiling, and the only way I was going to be able to move up and broaden my experience, and title and everything else with it was to basically either move out or wait until someone leaves, which could have been 10 years. But then I saw a job opportunity come up for a local credit union, also in Cork.
Right.
It was a lock credit union, and they were actually looking for somebody to be the business development and marketing manager. So I was really able to go from my first position, which was a quite a junior position, to actually leading the marketing for a company. Albeit a small local firm, it was still something that was really going to broaden my experience and was going to get me properly at the management table and making decisions with the head of lending and with the compliance manager, actually there and directly with the CEO. So I decided to do that, and I moved there and I worked there for another year, and it was really rewarding.
It's interesting because you now have a different challenge. So, for example, while you may be coming up with some creativity in terms of advertising, there are standards and certain things that can be said and can't be said. So that must have been a nice learning curve for you as well.
Absolutely. So from the credit union sector, really learn a lot about regulations, restrictions, GDPR, compliance. Something that like I genuinely probably know a lot more about compliance than some compliance managers in companies now, just because I was so restricted in that sector. But it does make you become quite innovative, and it does make you kind of flex your creative juices. So now, like skipping forward where I am right now, I'm not in a financial institution, and it's crazy the night and day kind of aspect of what you can do or how you can communicate. So it definitely helped me to broaden my thinking, I suppose.
It's amazing what we're looking at here is a sequence of things that put certain disciplines on you to help you sort of sharpen yourself up, which is actually quite interesting because we talked about discipline at the beginning and we talked about sort of your push away from discipline, but recognizing how important it was. But your sort of baptism of learning has been built around certain constrictions. So, all right, you were then going to move from that credit union to something else a bit more exciting.
Yes, so I was in that credit union for about a year, and it was very much what you would think, or what we would think as a society of what is a credit union. You know, it's your local area, it's the people that are within that area that can join. But then I saw an opportunity for a much bigger credit union called the Health Services Staffs Credit Union. And this was one based in Dublin, but actually it's a nationwide credit union. So it's primarily digital, and its primary base is everybody who works or studies in for healthcare, and also their family members. So that's its main base, but it also had physical location, normal credit unions, and it also on top of that had other aspects such as the CIE members could join, or CIE employees and post employees. So it was a very hybrid, I suppose, institute. But what was really exciting about it was that it was primarily digital first. You know, people could join all over the country, and it's something that needed to be tackled because the credit union prior to, I suppose, when I joined, or even the few years before I joined, up until that stage, a lot of it was word of mouth, and a lot of it
Yeah.
was still paper applications and done via post and stuff like that, as opposed to actually using the digital landscape that was available. So it's really exciting to be able to help digitize the credit union.
And if you're just joining us now, you're listening to You and Your Business with me, Alec Drew, on 103.2 Dublin City FM, where my guest today is Padraig from Refurbed. And just interesting, you're talking about you've moved into the credit union, and there's two things that kind of spring to mind for me. Number one, of course, regulations have been ramped up seriously after the recession that was here. So you're still within the financial constrictions of what you can say. But equally, you must have a very broad demographic in which you're dealing with and trying to communicate with.
Very broad demographic, absolutely, and particularly with the health services credit union, because a lot of our members and a lot of people who work in healthcare are actually from different nationalities. So
All right.
you know, there are a lot of people who travel over. As we know, there's many nurses and doctors from different nationalities. So it's actually an added kind of thing to think about, because we, as people who were born and bred in Ireland, know what a credit union is. Everyone knows what it is. You entered the local art competition, you know, when you were younger, or you got your
Yes.
first car loan. Whereas people who traveled here in their 20s or 30s, they've never heard of a credit union before. They don't, like, why would I join a credit union when I have the national bank? So it is something else that's quite an interesting thing that you need to think of when you're doing your marketing.
Yeah, and that means then that your messaging has to be targeted not just at different demographics, but also in terms of nationalities and how that message is conveyed.
Absolutely, and it was something that in general has always been quite important to me, but something I was really able to flex then in the marketing as well was diversity, and like showing people of different races, genders, orientations, you know, every sort of a thing. So it was really important for me to ensure that as much as I could, that everybody was represented in the marketing as well.
That must have been interesting because often the perception is that the management, which was initially a sort of volunteer management of the credit union, I'm sure it's been ramped up to more professional levels. You're now having to talk to maybe an older generation who may not buy into all of what you're talking about.
Absolutely. So the management within the company, I was definitely the youngest manager. I was in my 20s, and I think maybe the next oldest was about 40. And then aside from that, most people were in their 50s, like late 50s, or some in their
Mm.
early 60s. But the management within the company actually were quite open to digitization. It was more so the board of directors. So the board of directors is the volunteer group. So any big decision, like that, like, you know, a new online membership application process or something like that, we can all internally be like, yeah, that's, you know, it's great. It makes a lot of sense, but it needs to be presented to the board and the board needs to do it. So that's where it was like, okay, we really need to, you know, show what can be done, and we need to communicate it in the right way. I luckily, for my experience, was the board was super open to new options. We did see, I suppose, when I started, my first things were the low hanging fruits, which were some of the physical branches and being like,
Sure.
okay, or you know, our advertising here, like you'd walk past the branch and you wouldn't even know it's a credit union, you wouldn't know it's there. What can we do to make it like really visible? How can we get our brand known? So, and within the first few months, I actually did a lot of the physical aspects, and that really impressed the board. So very much got them on side, and they were like, "Oh, he has good ideas. Yeah, what does he want to do next?" And it
Right.
set a good foundation for then pushing the more digital aspects.
I think that's an interesting thing you've identified, and certainly for any of our SME business owners listening, to understand that you have different audiences that you need to speak to, and in many cases have to persuade. So, in the case of the management team, they were on board with you, but then having to take it to the board level, you were going to have to prove yourself by, as you said, dealing with the low hanging fruit and getting the wow factor over the line.
Absolutely, yeah, and it was something that very much was to get people on side at the start. Now they're very open already from the start, but there was just something myself. I was like, okay, I want to make sure that these people, you know that they can trust in me and that I can deliver. And as well, there was a internal thing, not never external, but there was an internal thing of like, God, I'm like 28 or whatever age I was, and most of the management is like, you know, in their mid 50s, are they all going to be like, yeah, you know, the child in the corner, you know? So it was like, no, I need to show the work as well, because respect is earned. So just wanted to make sure that I was earning it.
Yeah, and that's another interesting sort of thing. And possibly as the generations move on, that'll become less of a challenge for people. But that's certainly a much older generation perception that if you're young, you can't really know a lot.
Yeah, yeah, it is, and it's difficult then to get people on side because you know you don't want to be just like throwing a tantrum saying no, it's really good. So you know
Yeah,
it is
tantrum, that
important.
would just reinforce their perception of you.
Exactly, exactly.
I'd do that. Anyway, like as we move into the last sort of 5 minutes of the show, let's just talk about refurb. They came knocking on your door, and let's talk about them and what was the sort of persuasive argument for you to move there and what they do.
Yeah, sure. So Refurbed reached out, and as much as I shouldn't say this, I didn't know who Refurbed were before they reached out. But then I looked into the company and I just saw the mission, which was fantastic. So it really is about sustainability, about the environment, about helping consumers as well as the environment. So it's, you know, we're helping people through the cost of living crisis because the products themselves are a lot cheaper and they're still the same quality. But people can do that and make positive impacts on the environment. And it was just such a win-win coming from the credit union where it was all about the community and the people. Refurbed really had both. And then another thing which well, two other things which I suppose are really important to me was number one, when I was with the Health Services SAS Credit Union, it was COVID hit in the middle of it.
Yes, of course, yeah.
And I started working remotely during that time, and I loved it. I absolutely love remote work. And then Refurbed is a remote first company, so I knew I was able to do that. And then outside of that, I was able to broaden the good that I do within a company to a European audience. So I started and I went in, I was leading the marketing for Ireland, and that was my role. But also we plant trees, you know, in a lot of third world countries, and we got our products from around Europe. So I knew it had the broader reach. And then just over a year into working at Refurbed, I assumed the responsibility of doing the marketing operations for our 5 international markets, which includes Ireland. So really right now, making that impact in at least 5 countries within Europe, which is really exciting.
And what must be great for you is you're now being cut loose to the extent that you're pushing an open door with any sort of initiative that fits within the company culture.
Absolutely. And it's very much actually a data-led company. So when we do come up with new ideas and we do come up with things we want to test out, you do need the data to back it. But it's very exciting. And I have brought in some things like last year, for example, we did Cyber Week with Refurbed, and it was our first time doing Cyber Week. And this year now we're going to be doing it in all 7 markets, or 7 countries, excuse me. But yeah, it's it's exciting to be able to bring something in and also to see how well it can do outside of Ireland. I was hired as an Irish expert. I obviously know the country quite well. I've been born and
Sure.
bred here. But it's really exciting to see your thoughts come to fruition in other countries as well.
Yes, and also what you're getting is proof of concept by seeing it accepted across a number of different nationalities.
Exactly, 100%.
Yeah, talk about the Cyber Week. As I said, we've about 2 minutes left. Talk about whatever the Cyber Week was about.
Yeah, sure. So, you have Q4 campaigns. So I lead the campaigns for the international
Mm.
markets now. But we all have Q4 campaigns. We plan them quite in advance. And it's trying to, make sure that the company does as well as it can, obviously, throughout Q4, but also with Refurb that it's like we can do as much as we can for the environment. And something that I identified was that essentially we do Green Friday, and we have a campaign for Green Friday every year. So green, obviously, as opposed to black, because we do promote sustainable consumption. And then we always have something for Christmas as well. We promote gifting sustainably for Christmas. But we had a little gap in the middle, and I was saying, I really do feel like we can fill that gap. I feel like there is something that would work to continue to promote the sustainable products. And from doing research, Cyber Week was something that we've seen, number one, in Ireland, also in the UK, but also came across when I was looking up, keyword searches and trends in other markets. So with that in mind, tested out to bridge the gap last year and convinced another 2 countries, I believe it was, to come along with me. And then the 3 countries who did do it, and we did test it out, ended up benefiting from having it. So it was clear that it was actually good, that it was helping people, and it was getting us to our goals of planting more trees and having more sustainable electronics out there.
Fantastic. This is a great message to finish the show on. Where can people find out more about you and the company?
Sure. So they can find us, excuse me, on refurbed.ie. So it's
Mhm.
refurbed.ie. Of course, if they're in another country, they can look for the local site as well.
Sure. Well, listen, thank you very much to Padraig for coming into the Union Business Studio. Thanks also to Stephen and Sound. The podcast today shall be available on dublincityfm.ie from tomorrow. Thank you for your company. And please remember to join me, Alec Drew, again next week at the same time, 1 o'clock, right here on 103.2 Dublin City FM for another edition of You and Your Business.